Welcome to the Midweek Edition of Legal AF, joined by friend and colleague Dina Doll. So great to have you here, and so happy that you were able to step in for Michael Popok, who is normally the co-host on Wednesdays along with me. Thank you so much for stepping in. It's so fun. We can have a girl version of Legal AF this week and talk about the things that interest us. And I'm just so happy to be here with you today. Also, because it's the first Legal AF since the change in administration and since Donald Trump was inaugurated as president of the United States. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot that's already happened. He's doing a lot of things. But before we jump into it, I have to point out something. I want to talk about the inauguration. You know, they moved it indoors. It is freezing on the East Coast. I mean, it's so cold, but they moved it indoors, which meant not as many people could attend. But there were certain things about it that I thought were interesting. And one of them I thought was really strange was the outfit that Melania Trump decided to wear. Very different than what she wore last year. She wore sort of this light blue jacket with matching gloves, etc. This one, she seems to have this big hat on her head. And it just seemed strange, especially for an indoor event, right? I wouldn't expect a hat like that indoors. It was just a strange looking hat. And then it became kind of obvious why she was wearing this hat. And for people who are listening and not watching, let's just see the following pictures that you can kind of see. It really kind of keeps Donald Trump away from being able to kiss her. I think there's one more picture after this that really highlights that. I mean, he's really trying to get in there to kiss her, but that hat, the brim of that hat is keeping him away. So I don't know if this is true or not, but that's why I decided why I'm still in the Save Melania, she's trying to get out of the situation camp. I'll never accept that she's all in. But anyway, I just thought that was a fun way to start the show today.
I'll just jump in. I definitely think she was trying to Trump-proof herself, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, did you see the awkward kiss that they attempted at the RNC?
Yeah, exactly.
It was like obvious that they had not interacted like that in years. And yeah, I mean, she's obviously willing to stay married to him, but she does not want him to kiss her, certainly in public. And that's what all the young kids on TikTok were saying too. They all read that hat the same way. It was pretty obvious. She was
hilarious. Well, that's good to know because I'm not on TikTok, so I got to get on it, but I just haven't been. So it's good to know that they saw the same thing that I saw. You've seen her swipe. It's kind of hit his hand away when he tries to hold her hand too. So anyway, I get a chuckle out of that. A lot of stuff coming out though in the news. I mean, it's when we were talking about what to talk about today, it was hard to curate today's show because so much is coming out. I mean, did you see the new allegation against Pete Hegseth? There's an allegation from his former sister-in-law. So I guess his second wife, I don't know how many wives and families he's had, but his second wife apparently feared for her safety. And so this former sister-in-law, the sister of the second wife, submitted a response to a request from a Democratic senator, head of the Armed Services Committee, basically asking her what she knew. And she said he was volatile and threatening, and his second wife had to hide in a closet and she had to develop an escape plan. The wife came forward and said she didn't want to talk about her marriage, but she did say there was no physical abuse, and that's all she would say. She wouldn't say anything about the other abuse. It's just appalling to me that this is somebody who is going to likely be confirmed as the National Defense Secretary. I mean, it's just crazy to me that he is going to be, aside from the armed forces, aside from the fact that he has that white supremacist tattoo, there's all sorts of allegations. His own mother came forward and said, and basically called him out that he's not fit for this job. And he's going to be in charge of our entire military and our entire armed forces. It's just shocking to me. I can't even believe it. So I don't know.
That sworn statement that she submitted, she also said that she saw him drunk, even in his military uniform, which these senators keep trying to act as if like he's going to stop drinking. The fact that she's talking about her needing to hide in the closet and seeing him drunk at all times of day, even in uniform, should have like red flag alarm bells in every senator. And that Senator Jody, Ernst, who said that she was going to vote for him because of some simple conversation, like AKA like Senator Collins. I mean, people tell you what they want to hear when they want to get these nominations, but unfortunately, I don't know if this new evidence is going to sway enough people, but it's really disturbing.
It's really disturbing. It's just crazy. These aren't people who have any interest other than just protecting his own mother came forward against him, right? I mean, that takes a lot to do. She must have really been concerned. So anyway, a lot to talk about and so much that we can go into. But I'm really happy that we curated our list, and we're going to talk about these crazy flurry of executive orders that Trump has signed with great fanfare, like he does everything, right? He absolutely does things with ceremony and drama. Whether it has substance or not, who knows? But he absolutely likes to do them in public and with big drama and big ceremony. And so he signed a bunch of executive orders that we'll talk about a few of. There's also already lawsuits against them and several of them. So that'll be very interesting to dive into with you. We also are going to start talking about pardons that were issued and the ones that weren't, because that was another thing that he also very ceremoniously did in a big, flashy, splashy way on his first day in office, also very unique. And I want to also talk about how dangerous his revenge and retribution already is through his words and actions, and some of the personnel choices and decisions he's making and changes. It's just shocking all that he's doing on the very first couple of days. It's actually reckless what he's doing, frankly. So we're going to talk about that, and also what happened in church the day he went to church, the day of the inauguration. There was a bishop that called him out in front of everybody, including his family. She's my new hero. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Clearly got under his skin because he started tweeting or truthing about it, or whatever it is you do now. You always know when something gets under your skin because he starts to do that. So why don't we start with these executive orders and these new lawsuits that are coming out? I mean, first of all, let's talk a little bit about what is an executive order, right? Because Congress is the one who passes laws, and Congress you have to have a majority in the House, majority in the Senate, and then it comes up to the president, who signs the bill. And because the framers of the Constitution did not want there to be a king, right? And so you have separation of powers. So the Congress will pass laws. The president will either veto it or vote for it. And once he votes for it, it becomes the law of the land, and then judges will interpret it. So what exactly is an executive order if it's not a law? An executive order is something that essentially he has the power to order his own branch, the executive branch, to do certain things, so long as they don't violate other laws or violate the Constitution. He can't, for example, pass an executive order that forces private citizens to do anything, or that forces other branches of government to do anything. So executive orders, although they're extremely powerful, some of them, they also have some limits and guardrails, also subject to the courts, right, if they're challenged. And so usually what will be interesting with these executive orders, and we'll talk about them specifically, but what I find really interesting is how will the courts interpret these executive orders, because some of them seem just wildly unconstitutional, in my opinion. And also, typically what courts do is when there's a challenge to an executive order, they will typically preserve the status quo during the pendency of the litigation, meaning the executive order will not go into effect, right? Because the status quo, meaning what it was before, usually stays in effect until a judge or a court can determine what an executive order, whether or not it's appropriate. And, examples of executive orders that Biden tried to do, but were challenged in the courts, and the courts shot them down, had to do with student loans, if you remember, right? So you might want to try to do certain things, but they don't always work because the executive power is not limitless. So let's talk about a few of these executive orders. And, frankly, I was thinking when I wrote this down and I was looking at it, I was like, oh, let's talk about some highlights. But I actually think we should call them lowlights because these are really just shocking and terrible and upsetting, frankly. And one of them, I thought we could start with one having to do with gender. An executive order that was signed by Trump on Monday basically says there's only two genders, right? Females and males. They will be defined at conception. Okay, at conception. And the way it's defined, this is the strangest language I've ever seen. Someone who eventually produces the large reproductive cell would be deemed female. A male would be defined as the person who eventually produces the small reproductive cell. I mean, why can't they use the words egg and sperm even?
Yeah.
It's so weird. It also says that the federal government would no longer recognize gender identity and only sex as defined by an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. It also prohibits the use of federal funds for any promotion of gender ideology through grants or other government programming, as well as the use of public funding for transition-related medical procedures in prison. And it basically writes transgender Americans out of existence. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me, that executive order.
Mm-hmm. It's so many of his executive orders are like completely unnecessary, just attacks on people. I think we're going to talk about the bishop later, but I felt like that's really what she was calling to, is like, why are you unnecessarily hurting people? Because what does it really harm? He basically saying when you apply for a passport or other federal documents, right now you can check a box female, male, or X, and you can no longer check the box X. What does it harm people to check the box X? It's not harming me if somebody else checks the box X. Like, you are like, mind your own business. And instead it's just putting so much more trauma on people who have had it. It's so difficult for somebody to come to terms with not identifying with the gender that they were at birth. So difficult to go through the process of transition. So difficult for parents, so difficult for the child. I mean, a friend of mine's child has gone through this, and, she was saying like that matters to the child, like to be able to have a document that matches their identification. What does it hurt somebody? To me, it's like unnecessarily mean. And, so that's how I feel about that particular one.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's vicious and cruel and really takes a huge step backwards. I mean, first of all, I can't imagine what it must be like to be born into the wrong body, the wrong biological body, right? That's got to be traumatizing and difficult and confusing. And I would argue probably not the easiest path and the easiest life. And if someone has the wherewithal and the courage to be able to be their true self, why wouldn't we celebrate that, right? Why would we instead do what he's doing, which is making it not exist anymore in the world? I mean, it's just so upsetting. It's so horrible. And it's just shocking to me that we are moving so far backwards. And I agree with you. It's not hurting anyone else, but yet they feel so threatened by this that, Nancy Mace, the congresswoman, 300 times in one day, she went after the transgender congresswoman. I'm forgetting her name right now, and she said she can't use the bathroom. And it was all about using the bathroom. And they passed a resolution that she can't use the bathroom. I mean, like, I don't understand what's the threat, what do members of Congress get naked in the bathroom? I mean, what is it that, you go into a stall, what difference does it make what somebody looks like when they have to use the toilet, like every single person has to use? Like, I just don't get what the issue is and why they're so upset by it and why this is so, why this really triggers them so much. They're threatened by this in some really strange way. And they always go to when you have these discussions with people, they always go to the sports analogy. Well, is it fair in sports? Men are just biologically different. And of course, some men are biologically different, right? But they're stronger, they just are, they're bigger, all that stuff. You hear that argument. And it's all about this thing about sports. And, I had this discussion with a very, very, very close person to me recently. And I try not to have these discussions because it can be very upsetting, especially with people that you love and that you're close to. But this is how it came out, was this sports thing. And they were talking about, well, why is it fair that if my daughter worked her whole life to be great at particular sport, and if this is what she was, if this is what, was her dream, why should some guy who suddenly decides he wants to be a girl walk on and crush her dreams because blah, blah, blah. And so I started with the premise that, first of all, it's not a thing. Okay. Let's look up the number of transgender athletes in the country who this happens, blah, 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 whatever. And the number is so minuscule, first of all, in sports. Like, I can't remember what criteria we used, but it was like, I think it was in college. We used that criteria. And it was like, the number was 40 throughout the whole country. And then I said, okay, so now let's Google how many people get struck by lightning a year, and the number is much higher. But we're not talking about lightning, it's just, but they make this boogeyman thing like it's some huge problem. So first of all, it's not a thing. It's not a problem. But they make it a problem. They make this fictitious issue. Number one. Number two, what about people who are just biologically born different? Like, okay, I want to be a basketball player, but I was born 5'1". It's not fair. How come you, because you're 6'8", get to have an advantage over me? Like, but we're okay with that in that regard. But I don't know. It's just this weird thing that people just freak out about. I don't understand it. And what upset me about it the most is this is a close person to me who considers themselves liberal. And somehow this insidious false narrative that is not just false, it's cruel, mean, and does not have any basis in what should be, in my opinion. How did that seep into their vocabulary? That was just really upsetting to me.
I mean, the end of the day, it's because it's winning for them. I was a poll observer in a swing polling location in Clark County, like 2 weeks before the election. And there was campaigning, right before the line where you can't campaign anymore. And somebody on the school board, every voter, she was talking about, keep the girls, the boys in school. They're changing their gender in the school. And I thought, like, this stuff is crazy. I cannot tell you the number of people, the voters who agreed with her. It was so disturbing. But the Republicans have realized this is fear-mongering. Misinformation is a winning issue for them. It's not going away. It's why he did that executive order. And in terms of trans children in sports, Utah, you would not consider, liberal state, was able to have a very common sense rule where they said, we will decide on a case by case basis. Because to your point, there's so few athletes where this applies to. You actually can apply a case by case basis. And sure, maybe when you transition will matter whether or not you play on a boys team or a girls team. It's such a common sense thing that solves all the issues. But the problem is this is not about common sense. It's not really about protecting girls and boys sports. It's about they want to use fear to win elections. And the problem with it is that the most vulnerable community, they are so small, they're already hurting, gets hurt more. And that's why, as disgusted as I am by the news and the executive orders, like, I'm not going anywhere because people like that need help. And if we can continue to talk about it and hopefully at some point change who's in charge to make this change, like, I feel like we have a responsibility to do it.
I just realized, listening to you, I missed a really good argument that I should have used in this discussion.
Okay.
Because you're right. They use it as a tool to, like, they think they're protecting children, and they think they're protecting children in schools. And that's why people think it's so important. Well, what if they go into the girls' bathroom or girls' sports, or, you're protecting these young children in schools? Okay. Like, what about guns? If you really care about protecting children in schools, what about the number of school shootings there are, and those number of deaths, and that kind of violence, and kids who are affected by that and who are traumatized by that? I guarantee you ask any child who goes in a bathroom with a trans person who uses their own stall and just privately goes in there, you ask, I guarantee you talk to those kids, and then you talk to the kids who were at a school shooting. The kids at a school shooting will say much more traumatized than the trans child. I mean, it's just it's just awful. But they don't really care about that. I mean, look at those numbers. Look at what happens, and instead, what they do? They all go out and buy more guns because it's just crazy. Their answer to guns is it's all about being tough, and I don't know. It just seems so crazy to me. We could talk about this forever. Let's move on to the executive order on ICE and deportations, right? Now, this one was just unbelievable. There were a couple executive orders that I think reference and taking together are really defining what's going to happen at the borders. First of all, he's declared a national emergency at the southern border. That way he can deploy the military to go help local authorities. He told the Secretary of Defense to seal the southern border and maintain the sovereignty and territorial integrity and security of the United States by repelling forms of invasion, including mass migration, narcotics, trafficking, human smuggling, etc. I mean, the language they're using is just shocking to describe people, right? Really nice, wonderful people, the people who we all know and love, who work in our restaurants, who clean our homes, who are our caregivers. I mean, these aren't drug cartels, whatever. It's just unbelievable to me when you look at kind of who are the people who are migrating here, people who want a better life, people like my grandparents, right? People like my husband's grandparents. I mean, it's all the same. People who just want a better life from where they are, and they paint them out. This is a national emergency. Anyway, he also, in another executive order, tasks the Secretary of Defense to send as many units or members of the armed forces as appropriate to support Homeland Security. They also, in one of them, say you can now, in enforcing these border protection these border laws, if you will, you can now make arrests at schools and places of worship. I mean, are you kidding me? And he's ordered attorneys around the country to investigate and prosecute the attorneys, meaning Department of Justice attorneys, the Assistant United States attorneys, to investigate and prosecute law enforcement officials in the states and cities if they refuse to enforce Trump administration's these new immigration policies. So it's just crazy to me, absolutely crazy. One of the executive orders was titled "Guaranteeing the State's Protection Against Invasion." I mean, it's just crazy, and that particular executive order is really lengthy. And it reads more like a legal brief than an executive order. I don't know if he's trying to give permission to Governor Greg Abbott or someone else to kind of say, I was relying on this legal theory of the president. I don't really know, but all I know is Greg Abbott's already putting those buoys back up in the water, right? That that ordered to be taken down. And using the word invasion along with the executive order really kind of sounds like they're trying to make this out to be like almost like a terrorist organization. I don't know. I can't help but think that he's planning to do something, invade Mexico. I don't know what he's planning. There's something up his sleeve, using this rhetoric and this language of things like invasion. What does he have? He's so in love with Putin, right? And it's like he wants to do everything Putin does. Have all these oligarchs, these billionaires by his kind of in charge of everything. And Putin, what does he do? He goes to he tries to annex Crimea and the Ukraine and take over territories. Well, what's Trump doing? He's talking about things like Mexico and Canada and Panama and Greenland, right? It's just anything Putin does, Trump wants to do. So I don't know if that's why he's doing this, if he's using language like that because he has plans for Mexico. I don't know. I don't speak Trump, but it's just shocking to me. What do you think about all?
I mean, I think he wants to invade our cities. I think he's going to use, that's his way of, the next step is having the military start marching down the streets of the sanctuary cities and pulling people, as you said, out of schools and religious people and hospitals also. I can't imagine being undocumented in this country right now, how scary of a time it is. And to your point, him making immigrants out to be this horrible group of people. I mean, my dad is an immigrant. This used to be, the Statue of Liberty. Like, he is taking us so far from this. He also, in an different executive order, stopped the amnesty program. So there's thousands of refugees in Afghanistan that were still planning on coming. They're like nowhere to go. There were people on the border of Mexico who had waited for a year for their appointment, and they were almost finally being called, and it got canceled. He did an executive order canceling the task force that was meant to reunite parents and children from his family separation policy in his first administration. You don't do something so sick as that unless you are just a cruel person. What is possibly wrong with reuniting children, some of them babies, with their parents? It's such a disgusting act that we did. But I think in that whole thing, the scary part, as we know, California, a lot of states are pushing back. California approved $50 million, not only to sue the Trump administration, but to give nonprofit legal associations in California money. So that way people who are on threat of deportation can get a lawyer. But the fact that he now has had this memo telling the Department of Justice to go after state and local officials who he says are stopping this for criminal prosecution. So you're setting up the mayor of Los Angeles for criminal prosecution. You're setting up maybe a police officer in Los Angeles who is standing there and not helping. I mean, this is getting really scary. This is starting to get really scary stuff. And, of course, we're grateful that California and Attorney General Rob Bonta are like on top of it. But this is, I think that he is setting up the military going in. This is why he calls it an invasion. And we have Attorney General Pam Bondi most likely going to be confirmed, and she will probably go after. And so they're going to have to deal with two fronts. They're going to have to deal with getting investigated criminally, at the same time making their communities safe from what is going to be racial profiling, what is going to be really, really scary times. California, as you know, has the largest undocumented population in the country. And right now, after these fires, we desperately need our undocumented immigrants who work in our construction. A large part of them work in our construction, and we had to rebuild houses. You can't even, this mix of things all coming together for states like California, city Los Angeles, it's going to be unprecedented. And we'll see how it all kind of unravels.
Yeah, the states are already fighting back and filing lawsuits against these executive orders because of what they're doing. This one has to do with birthright citizenship. 22 states sued to stop Trump's birthright citizenship order. Essentially, what he's trying to do in this executive order is he's trying to take away the birthright citizenship that people get that's frankly guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. But if we go into this without going to commercial first, Salty is going to kill me. So let's go quickly to a commercial and then we'll talk about birthright citizenship.
I'm so excited to share with you guys an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness. C15 is the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in 90 years. And get this, studies have confirmed that it's 3 times better, broader, and safer than omega-3. It's pretty simple. Essential nutrients keep our cells healthy, which keeps us healthy. If you want to get sciencey about it, Studies show that C15 works by strengthening our cells, improving our mitochondrial function, and protecting us against damaging free radicals. The result? Better long-term metabolic liver and heart health. It turns out many of us are deficient in C15, which results in weaker cells that make less energy and quit working earlier than they should. All of that makes us age faster, sleep poorly, feel sluggish. Is this sounding familiar? Fatty 15 is a science-backed, award-winning vegan and pure C15 supplement. By replenishing our cells with that essential C15 nutrient, Fatty 15 effectively repairs cells and restores our long-term health. Go science! Fatty 15 is made from a patented, pure, and oxidation-resistant C15 powder derived from plants. It's vegan-friendly, free of flavors, fillers, allergens, or preservatives. C15 is the only ingredient in Fatty 15, 100% pure. C15 works in multiple ways. It repairs age-related damage to cells, protects them from future breakdown, boosts mitochondrial energy output, and activates pathways in the body that help regulate our sleep, mood, and natural repair mechanisms that support our overall health. This functionality leads to a myriad of exciting benefits now and as we get older, namely improved metabolic liver and heart health, smoother functioning joints, deeper sleep, and healthier hair and skin and nails. Now that's essential. It comes in a gorgeous reusable glass bamboo jar, and refill capsules are shipped to your door quarterly in pouches made from recycled materials. Fatty 15 is on a mission to replenish our C15 levels and restore your long-term health. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/legalaf and use code legalaf at checkout. When we rescued our dog Lily 3 years ago, we made her a silent promise. We would find her the healthiest dog food we could to make her life better, and we found her. And of course, with a baby daughter, my wife and I needed something that was easy to store and serve for the human side of the promise. Fortunately, I found our next sponsor even before they were a sponsor, Sundays. Sundays is fresh dog food made from a short list of human-grade ingredients. Sundays contains 90% meat, 10% superfoods, and 0% synthetic nutrients or artificial ingredients. As soon as we started using Sundays and stopped using some other fresh ingredient brands requiring refrigeration, we experienced noticeable health improvements in our pup, including softer fur, fresher breath, better poops, and more energy after switching to Sundays. Knowing that we were giving Lily the best possible life of great nutrition after what she went through before finding her forever home gives us a warm feeling inside. Unlike other fresh dog foods, Sundays does not require refrigeration or preparation because of their air drying process. Just pour and serve. When you start a Sundays subscription, you'll automatically get 20% off and free shipping on every reorder. Cancel or pause your subscription anytime with their 100% satisfaction guarantee. Every order ships right to your door, so you'll never worry about running out of dog food again. And the ease of storage is one of the main reasons we switched to Sundays. Because it's air-dried, Sundays bags are lighter than others and easy to store in a pantry, and does not require like 2 tons of ice boxes and freezers, and the all-natural ingredients are lapped up by our dog in record time. That's the best vote of confidence ever. The new year is not only the perfect time for us humans to make healthy changes, but for your pup as well. Get 40% off a 2-week trial of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/legalaf or use code legalaf at checkout.
Okay, we're back. 22 states and 2 cities, including San Francisco and DC, are suing because of this birthright citizenship issue. Is one of the executive orders that Trump has signed. Really, just one. This is the one that's really kind of appalling, and apparently they are basically, this executive order essentially says he's refusing to recognize that children born in the United States, if they are born to unauthorized immigrants, they are not citizens. And he basically says that he can do this, and he has the authority to do this. And so there's 2 lawsuits. Now, I want to read the 14th Amendment, because the 14th Amendment has several sections, but the section 1 of the 14th Amendment, the very first words read, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. I just love this entire 14th Amendment section, which is why I read the whole thing. But the one that what really applies here is the all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Okay. So what he's saying is the and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's what he's hanging his hat on, saying that because your parents were not here legally, your parents were not subject, or you're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof because clearly you were born here. Well, first of all, there's 200 years or 150 years of precedent that basically says, no, that's not what it means. You're wrong. But there is an exception to, there are a few people who, if you're born here, you are not a U.S. citizen, and that's what they're hanging their hat on. And that's, so for example, diplomats. Diplomats have diplomatic immunity and are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, right? So they fall in that exception. I remember when I was a prosecutor, we had the United Nations here in New York. There would sometimes, every once in a while, a diplomat or someone with diplomatic immunity would commit a crime, whether it was domestic violence or drunk driving or a few other more serious ones. We couldn't prosecute that case because we did not have jurisdiction over that person. And so normally we would just send them back and their home country would have to handle it. But the issue is if they had children born in the United States, they would not be considered United States citizens because their parents are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But if you're here, anyone else who is here, even if you're here illegally, undocumented, whatever your status is, you're not, let's just make it somebody who sneaks in over the border, shouldn't be here, and has a baby. That individual who came here and is not here lawfully is still subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That is why people who are undocumented are in prison and jail, because some of them will commit crimes, and not most of them, actually. Most of them are peaceful, law-abiding, productive citizens, but a few will commit some crimes, just like United States citizens. A few will commit crimes, and they are prosecuted just like anybody else. So they are absolutely subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So this does not fall in that category. I think this is going to be struck down in 2 seconds. This one is clearly unconstitutional, and the president that can't just undo that. He'd have to actually ratify Congress can't even pass a law that does this. You actually have to ratify the Constitution, which is a whole procedure much harder than passing a law. That's what they want to do. But that's the process. So this one I think is going to fail. What do you think, Dina?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. The Supreme Court has looked at this issue, although our Supreme Court is not so tied to precedent, but I don't see them being that willing to change it outright. Possibly they put a dent in it. That's possible, but definitely not going to just reverse their precedent outright. And Congress has also spoken in this, even though they can't change it, but they have also clarified it over the years. So the interesting thing is that this executive order, he gave it 30 days before going into effect, and how they were practically going to carry it out is exactly what he said he was going to do. I've talked about this on this channel before, so none of this stuff was a surprise, but unfortunately he still got elected. But what is going to do is instructing basically his federal employees not to issue documents that they need to prove their citizenship, passports, etc. So what is going to happen once that 30 days? As we know, the court system can be very slow. So that timing, you might have, they say thousands and thousands of babies are going to be affected, not only because they can't get the passport, they will essentially be a citizen of nowhere. Imagine that, like in limbo. these children in limbo. And also the states aren't allowed to give them benefits because they're no longer citizens. So you also are going to have this issue of, the foster care system, the healthcare system, all these benefits that would normally flow their way. He's creating havoc. That's the whole point. He wants to make it as difficult as possible for an immigrant family in this country. He's punishing the parents and then he's punishing their children. It's not a mistake. He may not get, the Supreme Court might not uphold it. But in the meantime, those families are going to have a hard time getting benefits, proving their citizenship. This is a situation we're going to want to have this be as decide as quickly as possible through the courts. Because do we trust that the federal employees are going to ignore his executive order and go ahead and issue passports? That's going to be the thing to watch, is will they listen to his executive order or not? And I know that it's going to kind of tie to one of the other things we're going to talk about with the Schedule F employees. But that will be the interesting thing, is if any federal employees say, hey, we're going to, this is being litigated, we're going to continue to issue passports unless the court tells us otherwise, or do the reverse.
Yeah, no, I read somewhere that it's going to affect around 150 to 200,000 children a year that are born in this country. One good thing is it doesn't appear to be retroactive, meaning it's not people, because there's a lot of people who are like, wait a minute, I was, someone who's like in their 40s is like, well, my mom and dad at the time when I was born, weren't citizens. Does that mean I'm not a citizen? I've never lived anywhere else. I don't think it goes backwards, which is, I guess, one good thing, one saving grace in this. But yeah, so a couple other, before we move on and talk about something else, just a couple others that really bothered me. One of them is with the death penalty, and he is basically wants to enforce it much more, restore the death penalty, and protecting public safety. Again, I'm a former prosecutor, so of course this is something. Whenever I see anything involving crime and punishment, it definitely gets on. It definitely piques my interest. And, apparently he said the Attorney General shall evaluate the places of imprisonment and conditions of confinement for each of the 37 murderers whose federal death sentences were commuted by President Biden. And the Attorney General shall take all lawful and appropriate action to ensure that those offenders are imprisoned in conditions consistent with the monstrosity of their crimes and the threats they pose. Okay, so, and then they also want the Attorney General to further evaluate whether they can be prosecuted in states for capital crimes, and will recommend appropriate action to state and local authorities. Essentially, what he's saying is there were 40 people who were on death row, and Biden commuted 37 of their sentences to life imprisonment and decided they shouldn't be executed. And so he's referring to those 37 individuals, basically saying, okay, well, if we can't kill them, let's see if the states can kill them. And if they can't kill them, let's make sure they're housed in the worst prison under the worst conditions. I mean, tell me that's not a violation of the Eighth Amendment, the cruel and unusual, the protection against cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, he's just sanctioning things that are lawless and unconstitutional. And he even tells the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to pursue, assuming it's going to be Pam Bondi, to pursue overruling any Supreme Court decision that makes it harder to execute people, whether or not the decision is correct. But what struck me about that is the Department of Justice was never an advocate. The Department of Justice is always supposed to be neutral, and they follow the facts and apply the law without fear or favor. They shouldn't pursue overruling the Supreme Court of the United States. Like that just seems like a really weird and new place for the Department of Justice to be. It really hurts their credibility with the courts, I think. I mean, anyway, that one really kind of stuck in my craw, as they say on Brady, as they said in the Brady Bunch many years ago. But the other thing that he also just closing out the parade of horribles. Another one that really bothered me was he instructed all federal health agencies to pause all external communications, such as scientific reports. So they're not allowed to tell us anything. You know, if they know of a new pandemic, if they know of new scientific breakthroughs, not allowed to externally communicate. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me. He's politicizing everything, including health and science. Mm-hmm. And it's just terrible. It's just absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I mean, withdrawing from the World Health Organization is deeply disturbing. The appointment likely of RFK Jr. Yeah, I mean, these are dark times. You know, the information is going to be very hard. It's going to take harder to find the information, but there are all of these groups who, you know, thankfully there are guardrails and there are disclosure rules, and we're going to just have to get really creative to get information out. And in terms of him trying to go after people whose sentences were commuted, I think they would have a great due process violation argument too. It sounds like they're getting punished for a president exercising his valid power. That's how I would argue that, because, you know, the Supreme Court just gave a whole heck of a lot of power to the president, and it sounds like Trump just doesn't like the exercise of that power. So if I were them, it sounds like not even about them. You know, that's how I would argue it. Definitely sounds like retribution, that they're being punished because he didn't like the acts of Biden. So yeah, we're going to have to be a lot more diligent about getting information, because he wants to getting out of the Paris Climate Accord. Like there were so many things he did that were pretty bad. I mean, horrific, really.
Yeah, no, you're right. And thank God, though, as you pointed out, these organizations that are lining up to protect us and basically sue him and sue these policies on our behalf. And it's amazing, right? It's absolutely amazing. It's the ACLU, it's the State Democracy Defenders led by our friend Norm Eisen. All federal employees or union are suing Trump over workers' protections. You've got a lawsuit already about Doge. Tell us about Elon Musk and Doge, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, and those lawsuits.
I love how quickly these lawsuits were filed. It goes to show this time around, they were ready, right? You don't write briefs like that in one day. People were ready. People were prepared. So what's happening with Doge is they were trying to make it this outside agency and skirt the rules, because as we know, Elon Musk has a ton of federal grants, so many ethical violations. He probably couldn't be an inside department head or top official in a department. So they tried to do it outside. Well, sure enough, being a private outside group advising the government still requires certain disclosures like those meetings have to be public. Okay. They have to file a charter. They have to take minutes. They have to, they are kind of considered almost a quasi government in that they have certain responsibilities. Thankfully, we have these kind of rules purposely, so there wouldn't be this private group that's operating in the dark and we don't know anything about it. These are the guardrails. These are the guardrails that exist. We don't have to come up with it. And so all these groups suing, it's called a Federal Advisory Committee, FACA for short, and saying, this sounds like what you are doing, but you haven't done any of these things. One way to get around it is to make it an inside agency. But then if it's an inside agency, they're going to have all these, they have rules there too, including ethics. And most likely Elon Musk would never be willing to be a federal actual appointed official because of all of his ethics. So it's going to be difficult for them to operate completely unchecked, which is what they want. So good on those groups for filing those lawsuits.
Yeah, well, I hope it works. I really hope it works, because otherwise we're kind of screwed. So anyway, so on that note, let's go to our final ad break, and then I want to talk about the pardons, and because a lot's going on there.
The holiday season mess with your routine? Are you looking to take charge of your life with full mental clarity this new year? Enhance your sober January and embrace CBD Awareness Month with VIA to experience the powerful benefits of hemp without the high. Trusted by over 500,000 happy customers, VIA is the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. VIA's collection of THC-free products combines minor cannabinoids like CBD, CBG, and CBN with botanical supplements for targeted effects you can actually feel. Whether you're looking to improve your sleep, focus, or relief, VIA has something for you. VIA is also well-renowned for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes, THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops. All crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part, VIA legally ships to nearly all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee, no medical card required. So if you're 21 years or older, check out our link to VIA's website link in our description and use code LEGALAF for 15% off. And if you're new to VIA, get a free gift of your choice. Listen, since I went full-time with media production, where I make or produce a dozen videos a day, which requires an iron backside and stamina, I rely on VIA's Elevate Focus Gummies with 10 milligrams of THC to help keep me mentally sharp and focused and, well, happy. And the Elevate Gummy is downright tasty too. I just love the mango paradise flavor. Easy to take, easy to use, and a game changer in the productivity of my podcast and YouTube day. Unlock the power of nature with VIA's organic and vegan hemp extracts, perfect for relaxation and rejuvenation. VIA is the only lifestyle hemp brand. They use compounds found in hemp along with active plant extracts to create products each with a specific effect in mind. Whether you want to get better sleep, ease anxiety, enhance your mood, or just have a good time, they have something for you. Their products range from 0 milligrams to 100 milligrams of THC, so these guys have got you covered, whether you're looking to microdose or enjoy more potent effects. All of their products are farmed and crafted with care in the United States, and their top-notch customer support can't be beat. If you're over 21, check out the link to VIA in our description and use the code LEGALAF to receive 15% off. And if you're new to VIA, get a free gift of your choice after you purchase. They ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. This year, enhance your everyday with VIA. Your nighttime bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep quality. If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter the weather. So you get better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Sleeping on bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Upgrade your sleep this year. Go to trymiracle.com/legalaf to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code LEGALAF at checkout, you'll get a free 3-piece towel set and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/legalaf and use the code LEGALAF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/legalaf to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
We're back, and let's talk about these pardons, okay? Boy, he is just not wasting any time to deliver on his promises, frankly. And he is issued sweeping pardons of the January 6 defendants, including the violent ones, which nobody thought he was going to do, including his own vice president. And he just pardoned or commuted the sentence of all of them. But before we talk about that, let's talk about what Biden did in his last days in office. It's common and customary for presidents on the way out to issue pardons. And so there's no surprise that he was going to do that. But what surprised me wasn't who Biden pardoned, was who he didn't pardon, right? He pardoned his family members. He pardoned the January 6th select committee members and staff like Liz Cheney, et cetera. But that was, I think, expected. There was a lot of chatter about people who said they didn't want pardons because there's several court cases that have come forward, have interpreted the acceptance of a pardon as an admission of guilt or acceptance of responsibility, and so therefore they don't want to have to admit that they did anything because they didn't do anything wrong. And so that to me is just way too convoluted. I don't know why you wouldn't take a pardon when you've got Kash Patel and Donald Trump talking about literally weaponizing the Department of Justice that was not weaponized, and revenge prosecutions, which have nothing to do with the law or the facts or unbiased blind administration of blind justice, right? It's and even if you ultimately get acquitted, an investigation, whether it's a criminal investigation, a civil investigation, a tax audit, whatever it is, they can really mess up your life, right? So I get why I'd want a pardon. I mean, if I were most of the people that we're about to talk about, but apparently either they weren't offered or they weren't accepted. I have no idea if there were any discussions behind the scenes. But one of the things that surprised me the most was that Jack Smith, the special counsel, and his staff didn't get pardons. And it surprised me because I would have thought he would have, right? Because that's, clearly on the top of Trump's hit list of revenge. But then I was talking to a friend of mine who, we used to work with Jack Smith. We know Jack Smith from back in the day. We all came up as baby assistant DAs together. Haven't talked to him in probably, 10 years or more. And, but, we know the kind of person he is. And my friend was saying, I bet he didn't even want a pardon. And we were recalling a case that he prosecuted when he was a federal prosecutor, where where two undercover police officers were killed, and he was getting all sorts of death threats. And somebody, his boss said, you should get off the case because, you're getting death threats. And he basically was like, no way, I'm not getting off the case. Otherwise they win. You don't get to pick your prosecutor. And he's kind of a badass. And so I bet he's kind of like, bring it on, right? And go ahead, do whatever you're going to do. And all of the bad facts that I was unable to release in a report about you will come out. And so I kind of think, I don't know, in my fantasy world, and of course I've made all this up about Jack Smith of what I think he's doing, but part of me wonders, is that part of the calculus, that A, he knows he can defend himself, and B, then he'll put all the ugly facts out there. So he's kind of like, really? Come on, Mr. Tough Guy. You really think you're tough? Bring it on. I don't know. What do you think? I
thought he didn't pardon because Attorney General Letitia James was getting a lot of threats too. I thought he didn't pardon any of the attorneys or the judges, because the whole time he maintained that he was independent from the criminal prosecutions and investigations into Trump. And I think that just maintained his independence. I think if he had weighed in with a pardon, that was him getting involved, frankly. And he didn't want to get involved. This was him being Biden and keeping the DOJ completely separate. And I do think, there's the realization that every single one of those attorneys and judges are more than capable of defending themselves and would probably welcome, hey, if they actually take them to court, you have to have evidence. And I don't know if the Trump folks really want to go up against them in court, but I do think it was about Biden keeping that separation from the DOJ. That's how I took it.
You're probably right. I like my Jack Smith is a badass better.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Well,
Who knows? Another interesting thing I was reading, there was a great op-ed in New York Times by Jeffrey Toobin, who said that Trump actually pardoned himself. He said Trump was asked at a Univision town hall about the riot and the pardons, and he said, quote, "There were no guns down there. We didn't have guns. And I thought that was an interesting Freudian slip, and this is what Jeffrey Toobin pointed out, that because it was that he was pardoning himself with this sweeping, we didn't have guns. First of all, he also pointed out it's false. 180 people were charged with a deadly weapon in these cases, including guns. But I thought that was sort of fascinating. But, look, he pardoned all of the January 6 people, including those who are already convicted, those who have pending cases, including he pardoned Stuart Rhodes and Enrique Tarrio, heads of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. And I mean, I don't think anyone thought those guys were going to be pardoned. The shaman, whatever that guy is, the guy all dressed up, he was also pardoned. It was just shocking to me, and I couldn't believe it. I want to read a couple of judges have even weighed in, because there are a lot of pending cases that have to be dismissed, right? And all these cases, these trials, these over 1,000 cases were brought in Washington, D.C., because that's where the riot and the insurrection occurred. And several federal judges, they were spread out over the various judges. And so they're writing decisions in these dismissals, and they're weighing in. So Judge Tanya Chutkin said, for example, quote, "Trump's mass pardons cannot whitewash the blood, feces, and terror that the mob left in its wake. It cannot repair the jagged breach in America's sacred tradition of peacefully transitioning power. In hundreds of cases like this one over the past 4 years, judges in this district have administered justice without fear or favor. The historical record established by those proceedings must stand, unmoved by political winds, as a testament and as a warning." I mean, that gave me the chills. Mm-hmm. Judge Beryl Howell wrote in an 8-page order in a different case of 2 of the January 6 defendants who had pled guilty to felonies, quote, "No process of national reconciliation can begin when poor losers whose preferred candidate loses an election are glorified for disrupting a constitutionally mandated proceeding in Congress and doing so with impunity. Trump's decision merely raises the dangerous specter of future lawless conduct by other poor losers and undermines the rule of law." And then finally, Judge Colleen Kohler-Cotelli said Trump's pardoning can never change the immutable record of violence and heroism of law enforcement, which will remain enshrined in court records. Dismissal of charges, pardons after convictions, and commutations of sentences will not change the truth of what happened on January 6, 2021. What occurred that day is preserved for the future through thousands of contemporaneous videos, transcripts of trials, jury verdicts, and judicial opinions analyzing and recounting the evidence through a neutral lens. And he said the heroism of each officer who responded could also not be erased. They were grossly outnumbered. Those law enforcement officers acted valiantly to protect the members of Congress, their staff, the vice president and his family. The integrity of the Capitol grounds and the Capitol building are a symbol of liberty and a symbol of democratic rule around the world. On that note, Salty, play. There was a what's his name? The Michael, what was his name?
Fanone?
Yes, thank you. Michael Fanone, the police officer who testified in many different of the cases. He also testified before the January 6th Select Committee. He was on CNN today, and his voice was cracking, of what this means, of what this means for him and what this means, for his future. Salty, will you play the clip?
Any regrets? No, I don't. because we did the right thing. We were there to protect Trump supporters from Antifa. We were there to protect and secure 2 permitted events on Capitol grounds where members of Congress were going to speak. The guys that went inside did not commit any crimes. In fact, they helped people. They helped the police and helped the people out.
He says he has no regrets. What do you say, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I would say to Stuart Rhodes. Go fuck yourself.
Okay.
You're a liar.
We didn't obviously get to beep that word out, but obviously this is personal to you, Michael. This is very personal to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just horrendous. I actually listened to the whole interview, and he's a hero, right? He's a former DC Metro police officer who was there that day trying to protect people. He testified at trials against people who were actively violent. Over 140 police officers were injured that day. People lost their lives that day. We all saw it with our own eyes. It was on video. Of course, there was violence, and it's like Trump whitewashes it all. But then you take a step back and you wonder why. Why is he doing it? It's because he was their leader. He's the one who incited them to do it all. He's the one who told them to do it. He pulled the trigger. He pulled the trigger that was that crowd and pointed at them at the Capitol. And not only is he not facing a minute in jail for it or a prosecution for it, he got away with it. So he's going to let all of them get away with it too. Of course, this is what he's going to do. It makes all the sense in the world. It's completely on brand. And we elected him. It's just shocking to me. And, that was Stuart Rhodes, the oath keeper, who claimed that, he was there to help the police and he has no regrets, which is just lying, right? It's absolutely lying. And, there was a reporter that asked Trump, and there's you can put this up. It's the Aaron Rupert, I think it's from X, Salty. I sent it to you. It says, the reporter says, is there now a place for the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers in the political conversation following your pardons? And Trump said, well, we'll have to see. I mean, talk about stand back or stand by, right? This was on Fox, and he was taking questions. He basically said, the reporter said, is there a place for the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers following your pardons? He's like, we'll have to see. If that's not exactly what he said during those debates, I don't know what it is. And, look, Enrique Tarrio went on InfoWars afterward, of course, on Alex Jones's show, and said it was worth it, and also essentially basically endorsed Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. So that should tell you about them. And you've just got people who Trump is putting into office that is just shocking, right? The interim U.S. attorney for D.C., Ed Martin, previously had given an award to a Jan 6 rioter who's a Nazi sympathizer who went to work with a Hitler mustache, blamed COVID on the Jews, and told coworkers that Hitler should have finished the job. So it's just crazy what they're doing. And before we move on to this next section of a revenge overhaul of the Department of Justice, I want to just mention one more retired Capitol Police Sergeant. His name is Aquilino Gonell, who testified against so many defendants in January 6 trials and proceedings. Okay, he spoke at the DNC. He's an immigrant from the Dominican Republic. He defended our Capitol on January 6. Okay, there's a text. He signed up for text alerts for people who he testified against at trial, right? You get these text alerts like any crime victim would about people who are incarcerated and if they're going to be released. And this is literally text messages that he gets a picture of each call he was getting from a justice notification saying that a defendant he testified against is being released from the Department of Corrections. I mean, I can't imagine what that must feel like. So, it's just crazy. And one last person he pardoned, which I also thought was pretty telling, was this guy, Ross Ulbricht, who is the founder of the Silk Road dark web marketplace, serving a life sentence. I remember when I was a prosecutor, the Silk Road was where people bought drugs and guns. You know, it's this completely undetectable, anonymous, using cryptocurrency black market, essentially, of lawlessness. I mean, you might as well just go out and sell guns and drugs and human trafficking and anything else you want just on the street. Because what's the difference, right? If it's on the street or if it's on the internet, if you can just do it with impunity. He was prosecuted, and he's already served 11 years, and he's essentially he's being released. So it's just shocking to me. The rule of law means nothing anymore.
Mm-hmm. Harry Dunn, one of the police officers who also was so brave that day, gave an interview, and he said, you know, that he was just so upset that anybody was caught off guard by this, because Trump said all along he was going to do this. And it is true. Trump all along said he was going to pardon the January 6th people. He never once said he was going to do it differently for the violent people and not the violent people. And I'm so tired of people not listening to him, because he tells us who he is and everybody wants to whitewash it. But this was always his plan. He told us that plan. People wanted to ignore it when they decided to vote for him in the ballot. I mean, I could not imagine being a Capitol Police officer from this day forward. I mean, if I were in Congress, or frankly, the Supreme Court, or any place else where I'm going to do something that Trump and his army doesn't like, I am so much more now at risk. Do you think the next Capitol Police officer is going to spend 5 hours hand-to-hand combat to protect that Capitol when they know this is what happens? Like, absolutely not. There's no way people will protect our institutions in a way they did on that day, because they see what happens. I mean, 5 police officers died that day. All those injuries, the convictions showed the evidence they had, and it all meant nothing. It meant nothing because Trump called his army there that day. There, you know, he paid for some of the people to come there that day. This was his army. This is why he pardoned them. He was happy that they were violent because they liked the fact that they were doing it for him. He's the most narcissist person ever. And he does want them to hang around because he might need them again. And, you know, he was willing to do this day one. He didn't think it tainted the rest of his presidency. So I think that goes to show what he's willing to do for them the next 4 years while he has his pardon power. It's scary. And, in terms of not only is it maybe going to be like less safe for government people, but to your point about the judges, Judge Chuckin, who like spoke out so eloquently and forcefully about the fact that like the thing, you know, what happened that day cannot be erased, including like the feces. Like she went into detail so we could all like imagine, because she presided over so many January 6th trials. She heard all the evidence of the guilt. There was no question the sentences she had to impose because of the evidence. She sees the injustice. And my only last thing about this is the fact that the Department of Justice could prosecute hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of January 6 people, but fail to start a prosecution of Trump until what, almost a year, like not even a year before the election. Way too late. It was way too late. That's on you, Merrick Garland. When you started rounding up the January 6 people, you should have rounded up the leader, and we may not be in this situation.
Yeah, no, that's going to go down in history as one of the big unfortunate errors, unforced error for sure. Yeah, let's move on to Trump firing and reassignment and retribution, frankly, at the Department of Justice. I mean, first of all, he starts with John Bolton, who was his national security advisor, right? He starts with removing his security clearance and his Secret Service protection. I mean, and saying terrible things about him. Unbelievable. And he removed and reassigned many top career officials in the national security and criminal divisions of the Department of Justice. Now, normally there's like a 120-day waiting period before you can make assignments when there's a new head of an agency. Because no one's been confirmed yet, there's no head of an agency. He's kind of swooping these in ahead of time. The whole spirit of that pause or delay is so that you can't do these kinds of shakeups like this in the beginning. You're supposed to really get your sea legs, get the lay of the land, understand what's happening in your agency, institutional knowledge. I mean, these are people who are career prosecutors and career intelligence officers who have been keeping us safe and have really important jobs and have institutional knowledge and relationships with other agencies, et cetera, that could be really important to whoever's coming next. And he's just reassigning them. I heard somewhere that he's like sending some to Alaska because you can't really fire them because they have certain protections. So instead, he's like just reassigning them to Timbuktu, if you will, and demoting them and putting them into, taking them away from things like counterintelligence. One guy was instrumental in the Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lago search warrant, that was done because he's a counterintelligence guy, highly respected terrorist prosecutor, and he's been reassigned. I mean, and they're putting him in places like this new national border security, whatever division that they're creating, knowing that people are going to resign or hoping that they'll resign because these assignments are demotions, frankly, and they're terrible. But it's just shocking to me. I don't know. What do you think about all that?
It's really similar to what he's trying to do with the civil employees with Schedule F. I mean, we heard again, Project 2025 previewed a lot of this, that they wanted to replace the non-political employees that carry out the day-to-day acts that keep our federal government running, right? Keep our air clean, our education working, all of that kind of stuff. And they want to replace it with political hacks, basically, who will do Trump's bidding. So his executive order with Schedule F basically is his attempt is to reassign those thousands and thousands of employees, maybe like 50,000 employees, to non-competitive review. Basically, instead of them making them at-will employees, so to allow them to be fired for no reason at all, even though right now they're classified to not be at-will employees, specifically for the purpose for them not to get fired from president to president. And there's a law from Congress that actually lays this all out. He's trying to undo this with the executive order because he wants to just fire thousands of people and have them do his bidding. Kind of to my point earlier about, will the federal employees issue the passports or not? Well, you might have somebody who's been working there for 40 years who's like, I'm going to issue this passport until a court tells me, basically not to. But if you have a political appointee by Trump, they're going to just do anything they want. So to your point of him trying to remake the prosecutors and the judiciary, and him also trying to remake the civil employees, this is what you do, when you want to become to take away democracy, take it away from the hands of the people, and condense the power in one person, Trump, who doesn't want to follow the law. Thankfully, the union for the federal employees has already filed a lawsuit for this, saying, based on that congressional act I mentioned, he can't just go ahead and change their status. So that's going to the courts. He tried to be his dictator on day one. I think that's my takeaway, right? He said I was going to be dictator on day one. Okay, he tried. We thankfully have rules. Some of them not well-known landmark type decisions, but we have rules on the books that are being utilized to try to stop him from being a dictator. And frankly, I think we're going to see in these next 4 years, how strong our guardrails are, what else needs to be done. We're going to be states' rights. It's going to be flipped on the head, and Democrats are going to be all about states' rights, right? Instead of the federal rights like the Republicans used to be. But the groups are not messing around with trying to stop a lot of the actions he took on day one.
Yeah, that's true. You're absolutely right. It's crazy. All right. We are running long on time. So let's end with one of my favorite stories of the week is Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy. I think I pronounced her last name correctly. She apparently directly appealed to Trump to have mercy on immigrants and gay children in her inaugural prayer at the National Cathedral, and clearly got under Trump's skin and called on her and her church to apologize for these inappropriate statements. She basically, her words were, "I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now." She says she's the leader of the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. Then she goes on to say there are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. The vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. They were the most beautiful words. I loved it. And I thought it was incredible that she said those words. Apparently, if you watch, there's a lot of people who have commented, if you watch the clip of Trump and his family at the church during this, there's all this, grimacing and facial stuff and, people looking around and I guess Usha Vance was just looking straight ahead when look at her husband. And then Trump said something, he came out and said, he said some things, you could tell what Trump wrote and you can tell what someone else wrote for him. So this is what I would argue someone else wrote for him. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. It's clearly not written by Trump. Mm-hmm. Then he writes, this is clearly what he wrote. She was nasty and not compelling or smart. Right? And then he says a large number of immigrants had come to the United States illegally and killed people. I mean, so you can always tell someone else writes it for him and he then takes over and is like, I'm going to use the same words that I use. He calls women nasty.
Yeah. The female term for him for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel this is how I think about it. We need resistance from every corner. And she yesterday was maybe day one resistance in the most eloquent way. She had a captive audience. And then today with Michael Fanone and his CNN, I would say that's resistance number 2, because sometimes simple, to the point, it wasn't bleeped out on CNN. So let's see who's going to be here tomorrow. I love seeing these acts of courage and bravery and speaking the truth.
I do too. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And there's, it's funny when Trump won the election, I started wondering, what's going to happen to Legal AF? What are we going to talk about? Is there going to be a lot to talk about?
Oh, gosh.
There's so much more to talk about now that because all the cases went away, right? All his legal cases, but there's so much more to talk about now that he has won the election, that it's crazy. I mean, just curating these topics today was difficult because there's so many lawless things that he's doing and things that will have an implication in the law. And so I look forward to covering this every week and sometimes in between with Ben Meiselas, with Michael Popok, and with you, Dina Doll. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for coming in. And Popok always gives me the last word to close out the Wednesday Legal AF. And I'd love to hand that honor to you. And you can talk about anything you want. What are the last words you want to leave us with?
Goodness, I think democracy dies in darkness. And as much as it's hard to hear some of these things that he did, we have to be informed and inform, and we can only make change if we know what's going on. So as you said, this was hard to talk, there was a lot more stuff even that we didn't get to. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits, a lot of change, but we'll keep on top of it, because that's how you get through democracy. If you don't know what's going on, it's not a democracy anymore.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. On that note, we've reached the end of another episode of Legal AF, the Midweek Edition. Please support us by subscribing to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. You can support us by subscribing to the Legal AF YouTube channel. We have a merch store you can go to on the MeidasTouch website, and there's some t-shirts you can buy. I know my dad and my stepmom wear their t-shirts every Wednesday when they watch Legal AF. They're huge super fans, and just shout out to all the people who have stuck with us through all of this and are going to continue to do this with us together, because we are all together in this, and we have to fight back this authoritarianism and get our democracy back and keep our rights and don't let them be taken away from us. So Dina, thank you for stepping in. It's always a pleasure to see you and spend this time with you.